Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's so lovely to see you all. A warm welcome to you all, to my colleagues at the APF Secretariat as well, to our members, prospective members, colleagues and friends. Thank you very much for joining this dialogue. My name is Pip Dargan, and I'm coming to you from Sydney, Australia, which is on the land, on the traditional land of the Gadigal and Wongal peoples of the Eora Nation, and I wish to pay my respects. Thank you for joining us today. It's really wonderful to have members come together through this dialogue series to exchange and discuss matters that you, as our members, have nominated for discussion. We have developed the dialogue series as a way of keeping APF members connected with each other whilst we still face obstacles with the ongoing impact of the pandemic. The APF is delighted to host this dialogue along with the National Human Rights Commission of India on people with disabilities and the role of national human rights institutions. For many years, the National Human Rights Commission of India has taken a very strong leadership role on people with disabilities. For example, in the UN negotiations, in the drafting of the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, it sent its Special Rapporteur for Disabilities, Ms. Anuradha Mohit, herself a woman with a disability, to lead negotiations for the APF and then eventually for GHANRI. This resulted in the historic and the first explicit inclusion of national human rights institution in a UN convention, and that was in the convention's Article 33. This is the third virtual dialogue that we've held in partnership with APF members. The first dialogue was held in partnership with the Malaysian Human Rights Commission on monitoring detention centres during COVID-19. And the second was held on the issue of promoting the rights of vulnerable groups during the pandemic in partnership with the Korean National Human Rights Commission. And today we meet on the issue of people with disabilities in partnership with the National Human Rights Commission of India. And I'm really pleased to advise you that next month we will host another virtual dialogue in partnership with the New Zealand Human Rights Commission on the issue of discrimination in employment with a focus on pay equity. And I know that issue is of concern to many of our institutions. This type of dialogue, this engagement really works to strengthen our network and to strengthen our resolve to work together to promote and protect human rights at home and in the region. I was delighted to receive so many requests from our members to speak today. I'm only sorry that we don't have enough time to fit you all in. What became evident to me is that there is a strong desire from our membership to exchange, to listen and learn from each other, despite the physical distance we have endured during the pandemic, or perhaps even more because of it. And today, again, our usual format for these dialogues, they are 90 minutes in duration. There is a slight change to the program that we sent you last week, where we have the National Human Rights Commission member, Dr. Moulay. He sends his apologies. He's not able to make the session today. However, he will be replaced by Mr. Rajiv Jan, also a member of the National Human Rights Commission of India. And we thank you, Mr. Jan, for speaking with us today. In terms of the structure for the session, the first 40 minutes, we will have 5 speakers from the National Human Rights Institutions of India, Australia, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And they will have up to 8 minutes to provide their presentations. And then after this, we will have an open session for around another 40 minutes, in which you can make comments, you can ask questions to the speakers, or make some very short remarks. And we ask kindly that if you do have a remark about some of the work that you are doing in relation to people with disabilities and your cooperation with them, that you please limit your intervention to 2 minutes. And we will then make some short closing remarks, and that will be done by the APF and also the National Human Rights Commission of India. And just another kind reminder that we are recording this session. So if you prefer not to be seen, please do turn off your video, but we do love to see faces as well. So please do put it on if you'd like to be engaged. And it's great to see people's faces when we do these dialogues. And may I ask you to please keep your microphone off if you're not speaking, and to please put it on if you are. And you can also follow the discussion on Twitter at hashtag APF Dialogue Series. And we are also recording the dialogue, and it will be available on the APF YouTube channel. But this really is a session for APF members and prospective members. It's not open to the public, but it will be publicly available on our YouTube channel. So on behalf of the APF Secretariat, it's again very lovely to see all of you joining us today. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Rajiv Jain, the member of the National Human Rights Commission of India, to please take the floor and make comments. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you from behalf of the National Human Rights Commission of India. This commission has championed the cause of disability for past so many decades, even before the UNCRP was agreed upon. Even before that, this commission had issued a manual for disability persons with international cooperation, as also with some domestic experts. But prior to that, let me briefly dwell on a country which ensure equal opportunities for the disabled in public and political life, besides their social and economic life, which are in consonance with Article 29 of the UNCRPD. So my talk is focused more on the political participation and public life of the disabled persons. So Article 39A of the Indian Constitution provides free legal aid, suitable legislation or schemes to ensure that justice is not denied to any citizen because of some disability. Besides, universal adult suffrage has been assured under Article 326 of the Constitution. Article 41 gives the right to work and to education to old, sick, and to disabled. The 11th schedule to Article 243G is on welfare of handicapped and mentally retarded persons, and the 12th schedule of Article 243W is to safeguard the interest of handicapped and mentally retarded. In addition, there are some other provisions which also impact the rights of disabled in the Constitution. Besides the Indian Constitution, India has at least 4 separate statutes which protect the rights of disabled persons. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 is there, and besides that, there is the National Trust for Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation, and Multiple Disabilities Act 1999. There is the Rehabilitation Council of India Act 1992. There's a National Persons with Disability, and there are some other specific acts for people with specific disabilities. And these acts ensure a level playing field for the disabled. In addition, affirmative action is taken by the state to protect the rights and to encourage the disabled persons in the main life of the country. The UNCRPD was ratified by the Government of India in October 2006. National Human Rights Commission, like I said, we have been championing the cause of disability since currently have a core group on disability. This core group has members from different stakeholders like academia, government, civil society activists, disabled professionals. And this core group meets periodically to review government policies, gaps in government policies, and gaps in implementation of those policies. The core group, a year earlier, in the wake of COVID, had also discussed the issue of problems that disabled were facing because of the COVID pandemic and had issued an advisory to the government of India. So, for instance, the advisory catered to the right of the disabled to get food during the pandemic, or medicines, or a place in the hospital in case they fall ill, or medicines to be delivered to their house in case they fall ill and there's problem of commuting, etc. And this advisory was subsequently adopted in significant portion by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, and also by different state governments. Incidentally, the government of India has a separate department dealing with disabled people. This department is called the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities. It functions under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. It's also because India has a large number of disabled of all kinds. Last census rated them at 2.68 crores or 26.8 million, which was about 2.2% of our population. In the political life of our country, we've had some disabled people who have struck it, who have reached very senior positions. But before that, our laws also ensure that the benefits of adult suffrage are available to the disabled. The Act on Rights of Persons with Disabilities mandates that the Election Commission of India and the State Election Commission shall ensure that all polling stations are accessible to persons with disabilities, and all materials related to the electoral process are easily understandable by and accessible to them. In addition, the Government of India has mandated that in every government establishment, not less than 4% of the total vacancies in the cadre strength in each group of posts meant to be filled with persons with benchmark disabilities, of which 1% shall be reserved for persons with benchmark disabilities. Separately, in the amendments have been carried out in the conduct of election rules, and a senior citizen of more than 80 years of age and persons with disabilities marked in the electoral roll now have the choice of voting either as absentee voter or as a regular voter on the poll day. In addition, the government is also working on another national policy for rights of persons with disabilities. Reverting to the subject of those who have done significantly well in political life, the most prominent person is Jaipal Reddy. Jaipal Reddy was affected by polio in childhood and continued with that disability lifelong. But he was a member of parliament for 5 terms. That means for nearly 25 years he was a member of parliament. Moreover, he was a cabinet minister and held different important portfolios like Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Petroleum and Natural Gas, Science and Technology, Ministry of Urban Development during different terms. So he is the most significant example of a person with disability who did well in political life, which also shows that there is no discrimination against disabled. In addition, Sadhan Gupta was the first blind member of parliament in India. Plus, even at the local level, that is the lowest level of administration, panchayat level, we have Minati Barik, who was the first female wheelchair who won the election of Kanta Bania Gram Panchayat in Odisha. This is local self-government at a village level. In addition, we have Ajit Jogi, who was a senior civil servant, subsequently joined politics, became the chief minister of Chhattisgarh state or a province. Subsequent an accident in 2004 where he became paralyzed and disabled. But he won the election for a member of parliament and was a member of parliament from 2004 to 2008. So thus, the country has institutional safeguards for people with disability to enable them to join in political life. And the commission receives complaints. It has a system for addressing complaints of disabled also, and it has helped out disabled in its responses to different complaints. About 230 complaints were received last year from disabled persons in the commission, which were dealt with. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that was really very useful to hear about the legal rights that have been set out in India's constitution, as well as legislation, and also including the structures within the National Human Rights Commission, and also the outline of measures to ensure the access of political rights for people with disabilities. And thank you so very much for that update. I'm now delighted to invite our second speaker, Dr. Ben Gauntlet, and Ben is the Disability Discrimination Commissioner at the Australian Human Rights Commission. So if I could invite you, Ben, to make your presentation, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pip. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
And can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
I'd like to acknowledge the National Human Rights Commission of India and the illuminating remarks that were previously made, and thank them for hosting today's session, and also acknowledge the APF for its role. Friends, other national human rights institutions. It is traditional in Australia when we give a presentation that we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we're presenting to you from. I'm presenting to you from Sydney, which is Gadigal land of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the audience today. I've been asked to speak to you in relation to the issue of disability barriers to inclusion as they relate to Australia from an attitudinal, social, policy and cultural construct. Australia signed and ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2007 and 2008, was one of the initial countries to do so. But it was also played a key role in the drafting of the convention itself, and presently the chair of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disability is an Australian, Miss Rosemary Keys. What I wanted to do today, though, in making my remarks, was to discuss, first of all, disability in Australia and the statistics we have in relation to disability, noting that disability is defined differently by a number of statistical measures, to outline the role of the Australian Human Rights Commission, the role of the Disability Discrimination Commissioner, which is my role, and then to talk about two strategies we've had to deal with the issues of changing attitudes and beliefs in relation to people with disability. One of these was to create a project with our largest and most prestigious employers called Includability, which is an Australian Human Rights Commission project, which looks to improve the work rights of people with disability and creates a strategy where organisations value the employment with disability as a way of, in a sense, distinguishing themselves from other organisations. And then to talk about the foundational Australian policy, which links disability policy across the Commonwealth, which is the Australian Disability Strategy, and to talk about our role within that policy. So the population of Australia could best be described as far smaller than India's population, but I'll transgress though for one moment just in terms of the number of people with disability who live in Australia. We have 4.4 million people who live with disability in Australia. which is approximately 18% of the population. However, what we do know is that disability is often acquired through the totality of someone's life. And we know that 80% of disability is acquired during a person's life. 80% of disability is invisible in nature, and that the correlation between age and disability is a direct one. And what we know is that people can expect to live approximately 21% of their lives with some form of disability in Australia, and that over 50% of people over the age of 65 live with some form of disability. 1 in 5 households in Australia have a person with disability in it. Now, one of the foundational government policies concerning disability in Australia is what's called the National Disability Insurance Scheme. The National Disability Insurance Scheme is a novel social insurance reform which provides 500,000 Australians with the most serious disability with funding to enable them to acquire services themselves with choice and control as to who that provider is. So it differs from other services where what often takes place is that an individual with disability will be provided with services. Instead, what happens, an individual with disability is provided with funds which they can then spend on services in the community. So within the Australian Constitution, there is a Commonwealth Federation. There are 6 states and 2 territories. There is a federal constitution, and under Commonwealth law, as passed by Commonwealth Parliament, there is a National Human Rights Institution, of which there are 7 commissioners across different diversity characteristics. I represent the role of Disability Discrimination Commissioner. Commissioners are appointed for often 5 years. And my lived experience of disability is that I'm a quadriplegic from a rugby accident when I was 16. The role of the Australian Human Rights Commission is to receive complaints, which it hears by a conciliation model, to undertake advocacy in terms of to improve the rights of people with disability. That includes, for example, making people aware of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and some of the issues that arise under it, to stress the importance of education at all levels of the education system relating to human rights, and to conduct reviews of particular legislation or particular circumstances that exist. And in another area, my colleague, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, has, for example, just looked into gender equality issues in the Commonwealth Parliament. And what I have listed there is the Australian Human Rights Commission Act, which enlivens the power of the Australian Human Rights Commission. But each commissioner has their own legislation of which they're appointed, and I'm appointed under the Disability Discrimination Act. The objects of the Act are principally to ensure that people with disability are treated as equals to others, and acknowledges the role of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but also acknowledges that there are functions of the Commission which are discharged through the Commissioner relating to the inclusion of people with disability more generally. If I might then, though, move to the next slide, which looks at 2 projects that we have. The first project, though, in discharging these responsibilities is an employment project. And in this project, what we've decided to do is to try and create a disruptive mechanism whereby employers value the employment of people with disability in a way that ensures that other employers would seek to be involved in that process. The Includability Project has 17 of Australia's leading employers as a part of it. It also has 17 ambassadors of people with disability who are part of the program, and has regular social media feed and information relating to people with disability more generally in the project itself, and runs employment pilot projects, which it reports back to its members, but also provides information in relation to so that organisations looking to employ people in Australia do so in a more constructive manner going forward and have a better idea of how to employ people in a way that is, for example, consistent with Article 27 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But the other strategy, which I think it is important to reveal to you all, is that Australia has a national disability strategy, or an Australian disability strategy, which has just been created, which seeks to link all aspects of a person with disabilities' life in Australia in a coordinated framework to deal with some of the attitudinal issues that can crop up and to ensure that people with disability are treated as an equal to others. My role within this strategy is to chair the Disability Advisory Council, and the strategy has a number of outcome areas which are linked with data collection, but also then reporting mechanisms to ensure that people with disability are over time treated as an equal to others. The strategy includes law reform, policy reform, and also has a clear outcome area relating to community attitudes. So in terms of some of the critical issues in dealing with barriers to inclusion in Australia, one that has definitely cropped up is the need to consider both community awareness and legal rules. The Disability Discrimination Act in Australia outlaws direct and indirect discrimination in certain areas of public life, but it's not enough to ensure that people with disability are necessarily treated as an equal. There's also a need to understand the constitutional framework that exists in Australia compared to state and Commonwealth law, and an understanding that time is needed to change mindsets in Australia, and that time needed to change mindsets means that community awareness raising takes time. In implementing policies under the Australia's Disability Strategy, and also from the history of the Australian Human Rights Commission, structural disadvantage, that is, for example, individuals living in poverty or having an inability to access things such as technology, have often been left behind in terms of social policies going forward, and is something that we need to improve upon in terms of our policy framework. And finally, there is an issue of intersectional challenges which needs to be acknowledged. That is, people with disability who are of a different gender, race, age, ethnicity, etc., are often not catered for in a way that policies are carefully designed for them, and they can be left behind in policy frameworks. So I might leave it there and thank you all for your time and listening to me, and I'll wait for any questions till the end, but I thank you again for the opportunity to present today, and I appreciate any questions you might have. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Ben, and thanks also for highlighting Australia's role in drafting the convention as well, and that the current chair of the committee on the Convention on People with Disabilities is Rosemary Keys, an eminent Australian, and that also we have a Australian of the Year, a person with a disability, and I think that's the first person that I know of that's been nominated for that particular leadership role in our community. So thank you for that. I was also really interested in the statistics that you raised, Ben, and also about the projects that the Australian Human Rights Commission is working on at the moment, including on the issue of working rights for people with disabilities in the Includability Project, but also its work in the National Disability Strategy, which I understand is for 10 years, 2021 to 2031, with a focus on law reform, policy reform, and community attitudes, and also raising, and I think the kind of barriers that you've raised are certainly probably very universal, and I'm sure many of our institutions here today would recognise those, including the critical issues of community awareness versus legal rules, constitutional framework, the time needed for change, structural disadvantage, and also intersectional challenges. So thank you, Ben, so very much for that. I now would love to welcome a colleague from the Malaysian Human Rights Commission, Sarah Hamza, and Sarah works within the Law and International Treaties Division of the Malaysian Human Rights Commission. And Sarah, if I could invite you to make your presentation, please. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Pip. And I will now share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, not yet.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. So, okay, my name is Sarah Anibranti Hamzah, and now I will share with you about the barriers to inclusion in Malaysia. Before I start my presentation, I would like to quote the definition about the inclusion expressed by the author in the Advocacy for Disability Inclusion in Malaysia, where the author said that the inclusion is not about persons with disabilities adjusting and fitting into society, but about society and systems changing to enable the participation of persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. So now Malaysia, for your information, Malaysia has become signatory to CRPD in 2008 and later ratified it in 2010. We already have our Act on the Persons with Disability Act 2008. So the main objective of this act is as a tool to for transformation from charity-based to right-based. This is data that I gathered from the report Advocacy for Disability Inclusion in Malaysia, where the respondent believe that these are three main areas deemed to be important. First, about the employment inclusion. Secondly, about the education inclusion. And thirdly, to enforce the rights of PWD. So as NHRI, Suhakam received complaints from the PWD community, and from 2017 to 2022, we only received 23 complaints from the community. 6 of the complaints are relating to the employment, and then relating to the access to building, finance, public transportation, recreation, and also family. In 2019, we actually has conducted a survey on the accessibility to places for worship. So here is the link about the report for the places of worship. However, I'm apologies because the report is in Malay, but I can share with you the video. So now I will share you the video about the accessibility to places of worship.
Thank you.
Can you hear it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No.
We don't see the video yet.
You don't see the video. Sorry.
No. Oh, here we go.
Okay, sorry.
Just started.
Yeah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Saya ingin sembahyang.
Saya ingin sembahyang.
我想要拜神。
தேவனை வணங்க விரும்புகிறேன்.
I want to pray.
I want to pray.
I just want to pray now.
我要拜拜。
Thanks, Sarah. That was interesting. Are you continuing on, or is that the end of the video and presentation?
I will continue.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
So that is a video about our work in the places of worship. So last year, Suhakam also had conducted a focus group discussion on challenges faced by persons with disability. This focus group discussion focused on access to education, information, health, and employment. So from this focus group discussion, we discovered that inclusive education was introduced early in the Education Act 1996. However, there are still barriers to inclusion because due to defectors, inadequate specialist staff members for all schools, some schools and classrooms are not constructed according to universal design principle. And the respondent also complained that the special education program is less challenging curriculum and has limited achievement goals compared to the mainstream education. So according to UNESCO report, Children Out of School, in Sabah, more than half of all registered children with disability are not enrolled in mainstream or in special education school. From this, the report highlighted that the barriers to inclusion might be because due to the factors of high cost to travel, shortage of specialist teacher, inadequate infrastructure, lack of public awareness, and even the perception from the parents where they thought that education as necessary are beyond the capability of the children with disabilities. Apart from that, we also gather information about students also have problems in university because there are limited resources and courses available for the PWD. Respondents are complaining that there is not enough support network, and they also have difficulty to access to the building. The students also are in dilemma whether to disclose their impairment. They have to take into consideration various factors such as study cost, suitability, meritocracy, feeling towards one's limitation, risk of discrimination, risk of manipulation, and fulfilling one's right. Okay, for the access to health, there are difficulty for PWD who are living in rural areas. So for example, person born with Down syndrome may be associated with other congenital disease, and they need to travel to hospital for medical appointment. Meanwhile, for deaf persons with emotional problems and suicidal thought have difficulty to access counseling services. And during the FGD, we get to know that no non-counselor has the skills to interpret to the Malaysian Sign Language. Meanwhile, for the focus access to information, we believe that every PWD needs to be protected against fake, false, and inappropriate information. So there should be a platform to provide access to accurate and true information. So here we get information that there are difficulty for them to access reading material. For example, individual with autism has struggled with understanding complex information, and they need reading materials in a simplified manner. And for the visually impaired person, there is limitation of braille textbooks and reference material. For speech and language impairment, dyslexia, reading materials need to be in form of simplified, straightforward, and clear language. Okay, apart from that, they also need to access to broadcast media, important government announcement and facilities. Most PWDs have difficulty in reading and understanding the newspaper. They rely heavily on internet, broadcast media, and social media for information, including important government announcement. Currently in Malaysia, we only have two television stations provide Malaysian Sign Language interpreters. Important talk show needs to be accompanied by interpretation using Malaysian Sign Language interpreters or closed caption. They also complaining about the need to have Malaysian Sign Language interpreter for dramas on TV. However, it is a progress now that Malaysia currently has officially acceded to Marrakesh Treaty. So with the accession as a member of the Marrakesh Treaty, it is hoped that this can contribute to the country's socio-economic progress by providing exemption from obtaining permission from copyright owners to make and distribute reading materials in accessible format copy for the visually impaired, and also to increase access to reading materials in accessible format from abroad and benefit the visually impaired. Meanwhile, for the access to employment, actually Malaysia, we have a policy to provide 1% employment opportunity for the PWD in the public sectors. This policy was created since 1988. However, in 2019, statistics revealed that only 0.29 to 0.29% PWDs work in public sectors. So this might be due to the issue that employers have stigma, and so we believe that the Employment Act 1955 should be amended to include protection for the job seekers. The employers have misconception of the capabilities of workers with disabilities and only offers work with limited scope. For the barriers to inclusion in employment, we need Malaysian Sign Language interpreters and also accessible public transport, and workplace also need to be accessible to the blind, physical and impaired person. Okay, as a summary, inclusion means every PWD can participate in all aspects of life like other able person. Currently, PWD are critically left out from access to education, health, information, and employment. So PWD continue to face inequalities in different aspects of life, which negatively affect their access to employment, education, and health, resulting them from being marginalized from social participation. So every PWD needs to be protected against fake, false, and inappropriate information. We also believe that PWD needs accessibility to places of worship too. So to have all of these, all relevant stakeholders, including politicians, policymakers, PWD, and the committee, need to be further educated on the PWD rights. So that's all.
Thank you, Sarah. I found that really interesting. Thank you for talking about the barriers of inclusion, and also in relation to the People with Disability Act of 2008 and that move from the charity model to a human rights model of engagement is really important. It's something that we stress also in our handbook that we've developed at the APF. And I was really delighted to see the video that you've produced. I don't think I've heard of a inquiry into for people with disabilities and accessing places of worship. So that was very new to me. Thank you very much. And I was delighted to see that the APF had helped support Suharkam in producing that video. So I'm really pleased and proud to be associated with that through the APF. And I Want to Pray, I think it's called. So thank you. And I'm sure we should be able to distribute that to other members if they're interested in viewing that. And also there's very interesting and very relevant conversations again through the focus group discussions that you've had, particularly around, you know, issues that still create barriers for inclusive education, which is so key to young people, very inadequate structures for classrooms, but also a less challenging curriculum for them intellectually. and of course, issues to access to health, especially for people in rural areas, and the important, very important area of access to information, which again is another barrier that many face, and I'm sure many of our institutions relate to that. Sarah, I really appreciate you speaking today. Thank you so much. I now have great pleasure to invite from the Indonesian National Human Rights Commission, Sandra Moniaga. And Sandra, of course, is a commission member at Komnas HAM. Sandra, it's so lovely to see you, and I warmly invite you to make your presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here to share the experience of Komnas HAM. First of all, I also would like to acknowledge our sincere thanks to the National Commission of Human Rights of India, Mr. Chairperson, commissioners, and all colleagues, and also to APF. I saw Kieran here and Pip, definitely, and to the other distinguished speakers and participants, including my colleagues from Komnas HAM. Allow me to share my presentation with PowerPoint, but just in case there is some technical problem, I send you a presentation to back up mine. So, share screen, yes. Could you see this?
Yes, Sandra, yes, it's come up. Thank you so much.
Okay.
We can see it very well.
Okay, and this is better, yeah? I just use the full screen.
Perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
please let me know if some problems.
Will do. That's perfect so far, Sandra.
Good. Okay, I like to share a presentation on the role of Komnas HAM in strengthening the rights of persons with disabilities in Indonesia. And this presentation is also prepared by myself and Ms. HAM. Just to give some highlight, disability is one of the issues that touch the population in 10 million people with some form of disability, and most common disability arise from difficulties with vision, hearing, and walking. Almost 50% of those who have disability have multiple disabilities, and people with disabilities in Indonesia have lower educational attainment, worse health, fewer economic access to public services than people without disabilities. The majority of the people with disability do not use assisted devices, hearing aids, walking aids, and also the access to prosthetics is also very low in Indonesia. Policy has been hampered by lack of detailed data and analysis of information about specific barriers facing by people with disability and how best to address them. However, Indonesia have ratified CRPD in 2011 and passed law number 8 of 2000 with disability, replacing the old law number 4 of 1997 on handicapped person. It's a change of paradigm also happened in 2016. Several implementing regulation already issued, and also a national commission for person with disability is already established. So just to remind all of us that we are all guided also by Paris principles that require NHRI to have as wide with two main responsibility for human rights promotion and also human rights protection. And CRPD, the role of NHRI also mentioned. Article 33 describes a triangular relationship between civil society, government, and NHRI. And government shall designate one or more focal point and independent mechanism, including monitoring procedure relating to the implementation of the convention. And civil society shall be involved and participate fully in this mechanism. So what about Komnas HAM? I think I can go briefly. Komnas HAM is a NHRI and established in 1993 by a presidential decree, but then strengthened with the law on human rights in 1999. And then we are also have given additional tasks for investigation of alleged gross human rights violation, specifically genocides and crimes against humanity. And also recently, we are given the state effort to prevent and treat victims of criminal act of sexual violence. This is the latest, the most recent addition. So how do Komnas HAM work in strengthening the right of person with disability? I mean, it's so many type of work, but I just make it into 3 clusters in law reform process, in institutional development, and education and campaign. The education and campaign is basically for cultural development of the majority, the society, and also the bureaucrats. So for the law reform process, as some of you aware, Komnas has been was very active in promoting the ratification of CRPD, which then ratified by 2011. And now we've been also campaigning the ratification of CRPD. The second, we were also active in advocating the revision of the law, the old law, number 4, 1997, of handicapped person. And we prepared also the first draft law of person with disability. And then later on, it was accepted by the legislative body, by the parliament. And we had a strong collaboration supporting the person with disability organization participation in the lawmaking process for law number 8 of 2016, which is the law on person with disability. So specifically, the law used the term disability, not handicap anymore. The term handicap is already demolished. And then the other role that we also use is giving recommendation to the court or amicus curiae. There, at least I remember 2 cases where I involved is the case waste, and then the second is about the civil servant who was fired by the Ministry of Finance. Where written witness, written opinion to the court, and both cases won by the person with disability. So that's a good news. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have already UN CRPD and ratified. We have the law concerning the right of person with disability. There are also specific regulation and local government regulation. We also have a master plan person with disability, which stipulated the policy and like a roadmap for the implementation. So this is quite comprehensive, and we witnessed the participation of people with disability organization in the overall process. How about for institutional development? So having the law is not enough. We also involved with institutional development. We have now a National Commission of Disability or Komisi Nasional Disabilitas, and Komnas HAM just signed an MOU with this institution to support the institutional development of this. And then we have series of dialogue with the Ministry of Social Affairs and Ministry of Health on the issue of right of person with mental disability in members. We recruited also several person with disability as commissioners and staff. Unfortunately, a term, but in the previous term, we had the person with disability in the commission. We have several staff also, a person with disability, which explicitly recruited, specially recruited. We have cooperation with various international organizations. We independent report to the UN treaty bodies. And we also work with other national authorities, such as stakeholders in administration of justice, judiciary, detention facilities, and other NHRI and regional bodies. We collaborate closely with the Komnas Perempuan and also with the Ombudsman of Republic of Indonesia on these issues. How about the education and campaign? Indonesia has so many disabled person organization, mostly based on types of disability, are so solid and have strong commitment. Komnas HAM always collaborate with the DPOs to promote disability issues through our functions. We also support inclusive policy implementation through several campaigns. We use sign language interpreter, subtitles in video, involving kids with Down syndrome in some of our programs, and some other things. We conduct also research and public dialogue with mental disability who are detained in some social houses, and also the right to education with a disability during COVID-19 pandemic. As you can see here, we also have e-posters on International Day of People with Person with Disability on Komnas HAM social media. We join rallies with people with disabilities when they are doing some campaign. So what are the challenges? Like happen in many countries, the number of the population is growing. And for Indonesia specifically, geographically, we have a very wide territory with different level of advancement in terms of human resources, particularly on disability issues. We still have social stigma to person with disability among the majority of the population and in most some of remote region. And we do have conflicting data of person with disabilities, and laws and regulations, special institutions are better now than before 2016. However, the implementation need to be improved. So challenge is that NHRI could play key roles in strengthening the right of person with disabilities. However, resources availability are the key challenges. Thank you. I think that is all my presentation. I hope I made my point clear enough. It's a bit too short, Pip, but
perfect. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again for your time and contribution, and really important to hear. Similarly to what we've heard from other colleagues, particularly in Malaysia, there's interesting the important paradigm shift that's taking place in terms of how people with disabilities are viewed. So moving away from that charity to a human rights-based approach, and also removing some of that language like handicapped, etc. And I think there's seems to be a certain trend in that occurring, which is a very good thing. Thank you for updating us actually on the work that the Komnas HAM is doing in terms of law reform processes, institutional development, education and campaigns, and particularly the work that you've done in terms of encouraging the government to ratify the convention, but also to actively monitor legislative bills and proposed bills as well. I think you said in 2016, Law 8, number 2016. The also interesting work that you're doing around friend of the court interventions, really useful to know. And of course, the challenges that you've outlined there, again, around increasing population growth and increasing numbers of people with disabilities, diverse territory in which you have to navigate in the many islands of Indonesia, the stigma, conflicting data, and also the need for further resources of course, to help carry out that work. I will remind everybody that in the concept note, the APF has set out some resources that the APF has produced, including there are some videos on our YouTube channel, and also the handbook that we have for national human rights institutions, and also some fact sheets, which are quite useful, I think, to our members. So thank you. That's the end of the session of our speakers, and I'd really like to thank you all for a very comprehensive and interesting presentation. I really appreciate it. We will now go into an open session. We've got, say, around 25 minutes for that. I noticed that there was a question in the chat section to Ben Gauntlet, our speaker from the Australian Human Rights Commission, which I've noticed that Ben has responded to, which is in relation to what is the difference between a Disability Discrimination Commissioner and the Disability Royal Commission, and Ben has already responded to that. So the questioner can refer to the chat box for that response. I also would request that if you have any questions for the speakers, to make any comments, please raise your hand. I do note that there was, the Timor-Leste has his hand up, Cavarino. But before I do that, there was a hand up from Galaxy A01 Core. Now, if Galaxy A01 Core would still like to speak, I noticed that you had your hand up for a while. Would you like to do so now?
Pip, I would like to interrupt.
Yep.
There is one more theme which Justice M.M. Kumar would be speaking on. It is on the role of artificial intelligence. I think you have missed it.
My apologies. Please do take the floor. My sincere apologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Principal Advisor. Thank you so much for granting the opportunity. My esteemed colleagues from Australia, India, Malaysia, and Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen, I feel extremely happy to address this august gathering on the topic of role of artificial intelligence in enhancing the accessibility for people with disabilities. I am Justice M.M. Kumar from National Human Rights Commission, India. As we all know, artificial intelligence refers to smart machines or algorithms that are capable of performing cognitive tasks usually done by humans. This includes different technologies, solutions that mimic humans and use logic from playing chess to solving many other problems. Artificial intelligence, automated decision-making, and machine learning technologies are rapidly changing the world. If its use is harnessed properly and responsibly, it can advance the overall goal of inclusive equality in the international human rights law, and in particular, the rights set out in the United Nations CRPD across numerous domains, including employment, access to commercial goods and services, the transformation of disability services, independent living and education, and so on. It could also meaningfully accelerate sustainable development benefiting persons with disability. Thus, technology in general and artificial intelligence in particular have a key role in accessibility. I may briefly refer to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. It imposes legal obligation on states on the development and use of artificial intelligence. States are also under obligation to eliminate discrimination on the basis of disability by any person, organization, or private enterprise, as is enshrined in Article 4.1 small e. Many other obligations are also imposed, such as promoting the design and development of information technologies at any stage, Article 9.2 small h. It also hints at a robust responsibility of the state to appropriately incentivize and regulate the private sector. Then right to equality and non-discrimination is incorporated in Article 2, 5, and 18. At its heart, the Convention advances a notion of inclusive equality under Article 5. All rights in the Convention are to be secured on an equal basis with others require reasonable accommodation. Right to autonomy and decision making is enshrined in Articles 3, 12, and 23. Ethical artificial intelligence principles acknowledge that individual human beings are ends in themselves and should not be instrumentalized for the ends of others. Participation in political and public life, as has been emphasized my esteemed colleague, Mr. Rajiv Jain, in the earlier part of the session. The requirement of Article 29 of the Convention regarding access to elections are also pertinent to the wide range of artificial intelligence technologies already in the use of electoral cycles. This includes tools enabled by artificial intelligence such as online voting system, similarly enabled voter education tools, and tools used by social media platforms to identify and eliminate foreign trolls attempting to provide disinformation to potential voters. All these tools can enhance access to the political process for persons with disability. Let us now see the uses of the artificial intelligence for the benefit of persons with disabilities. Communicating with others. The foremost use is the technology and the artificial intelligence with a motto of leave no one behind can be at the service of people. A lot of apps use artificial intelligence to favor accessibility. Many apps help visually impaired person to easily use and access the information, as well as use smart devices such as voice over. A screen reader, its main use is to enunciate any email or textual message. Talkback, another app, enables user to fully access and use their smartphones. Siri, iPhone's virtual assistant for text messages, web search, or communicating with others. Cortana helps blind or visually impaired users to navigate on their computer using simply their voice. Google Assistant, and so on and so forth. Then for persons with hearing impairment, many apps provide accessibility features like AVA, an instant transcription app that uses artificial intelligence to instantly transcribe the conversation of a group of people, an easy way for people with a hearing impairment to be included and to follow a conversation with several people without lip reading. Roger Voice, a French instant transcription app for group conversation available in 90 languages. It works the same way as AVA. For people with physical disability and speech issues, there are certain apps available. Virtual Assistant cater to the needs of people with reduced mobility and reduced dexterity. IFTTT, an app that connects other apps so that the user with poor dexterity can use all his smartphone's functionalities. It creates combination with apps to automatically perform tasks such as reading an email aloud and sending a tweet. Voiceit easily understand people with brain injuries or Parkinson's and whose speech may first seem difficult to apprehend. This app normalizes their speech. Support in providing ease in mobility. For people with disability, mobility proves to be one of the most challenging issues to overcome. How can a wheelchair user get around in the city in an autonomous and serene way when they constantly need to be aware of the location of road pavements and accessible toilets. A lot of navigation apps based on artificial intelligence technology can help them gain more autonomy and more spontaneity when they are getting around, such as Google Maps, Move It, Wheel Map, SoundScan ability. Living independently means accessibility at home. Artificial intelligence technology concerns any field and can thus enhance accessibility even at home. At home, with the smart speakers like Amazon Echo, with Alexa, and Google Home with Google Assistant, people with disability can control anything by voice, from turning on the lights to setting up an alarm or listening to music in the living room. Any home object can be connected, which means that a blind person can set up their oven just by asking Alexa, or that a person with a reduced dexterity can lower a room temperature just by using their voice. Even before arriving home, people with disability can still control their virtual assistant at home thanks to the apps like IFTTT. Accessing the same service as a non-disabled person inclusively means that everybody has the right to access any service regardless of their profiles and disabilities. Some non-exhaustive examples of artificial intelligence technology at the service of accessibility are Braille artificial intelligence tutor. Now, the NHRC has taken many initiatives in this regard, and Commission has issued Human Rights Advisory on Rights of Persons with Disability in the context of COVID-19 on September 28, 2020 to the central government, state government, as well as UT with recommendation for the digital inclusion person with disability. Develop and run internet-based market platform to support home-based small-scale commercial activity, especially for women with disabilities. The recommendations have been made to the states and UTs after the meeting of the core group on disabilities on 13 April 2022. The agency's establishment need to be facilitated by a special cell created in NIC, this is National Information Technology, on an urgent basis to make all websites accessible to persons with disability and make all websites accessible complying with WCAG within the next 6 months in a mission mode. Similarly, private establishment also need to be directed and their licenses to operate be linked to their following the access mandate. NIC could also offer this service on paid basis at affordable cost to private players to hasten the process. I may recommend that such an initiative needs to be taken at the Asia Pacific level too. Such a website by including the various apps for the benefit of disabled person can also be initiated by all the countries in Asia Pacific. I may also refer to some examples from India. One example is Sai Prasad Vishwanathan. Sai Prasad lost sensation when he was a kid in the lower half of his body. He becomes India's first skydiver. Also, his name has been registered in the Limca Book of Record for being the first Indian with the disability to skydive from 14,000 feet. The other leading example is Arunima Sinha. Arunima Sinha lost her legs unfortunately, but with prosthetic legs, she scaled Mount Everest, the highest peak in this region, and many other peaks in other countries. She is a president awardee. Dr. Stinder Singh, who is our core group member, he He was just 9 months old when he contracted polio. He is the founder of Infinite Ability, a medical humanity group on disability, and his efforts made encouraged to take initiative for post office, medical institute, polling booths, etc. He had shown the humanity a new ray of hope and passion, thus listening it among one of the top successful people with a disability in India. There are a large number of examples when the Supreme Court has allowed blind and other disabled persons to take the most prestigious examination of Union Public Service Commission IAS, and many of them have successfully entered this portal of administrative services of the country. I thank you very much for the time given to me, although we have to interrupt, ma'am. Once again, grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice. I'm so very sorry. Please accept my apologies again for cutting you off. And I'm certainly glad we got to hear you, because I think the issue that the Commission has raised and what you've just discussed about artificial intelligence and information technology is such a critical part of the conversation, as you've outlined, about how that technology can be used to support inclusivity for people with disabilities and for autonomy and decision-making purposes, and also for political engagement. And it was very interesting, the apps that you've raised as well. And I was also really interested, Justice, in the Commission's advisories that you mentioned as well, with recommendations in relation to people with disabilities and with a focus on information technology. If your office is able to share that through the chat session, or even to me by email at some point, I'm sure we'd be very happy to share that, along with all the other resources that our colleagues have discussed over the last hour. So thank you, Justice Kumar, much appreciated. We are running very late in time, and with your permission, colleagues, I think we should extend the session for another, say, 15 minutes, just so that we're able to capture some questions. We won't have enough time. It will be half an hour. So around a half an hour of discussion of questions, so that we get an opportunity to hear from you at least. So if I may now open the session to questions. I do believe initially that the Timor-Leste providor had their hand up, and I can see him re-entering the room. If you do have any questions, colleagues, please do raise your hand. Have you got questions for the speakers? Are there any comments you'd like to make? Are there any summaries of work that you're doing in your commissions that you'd like to share with us while we're here? I'm looking at the screen. There's no hand up yet. Ben, thank you. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Pip. The issue I would raise is the Australian Human Rights Commission's technology paper, which may be of interest to the National Human Rights Commission of India. I'm sure we can arrange a time to provide that through the Secretariat.
Perfect.
What it acknowledges is both the enormous benefits of technology, and I thank the judge for his erudite remarks in relation to those issues, but also where there are some issues in relation to co-design, the need for an understanding of universal design principles and how they can be used, and some of the limitations that can exist in relation to the effect of technology going forward. So I just thought I might volunteer that into the discussion.
Thank you, Ben. That would be fantastic, and we'd be very happy to receive the paper and distribute it as well. So thanks, Ben. Any other questions or comments, colleagues? Any questions to the speakers that we just had? Any issues that you'd like to raise? Any successes, any challenges? Okay, Bahrain. please.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be part here in the training, and thank you for all the valuable information that we get. One more practice that I want to share is from Bahrain is the National Institution for Human Rights. We get a very good practice. It was the campaign of to help them to reach. It was conducted a few like 2 or 3 years ago. This campaign was to help and to raise the awareness of people, and especially for the private sector, to make all the private places and also for the public transportation to be accessible by the disabled people, and to promote to promote the practices and to make all the places accessible and easily accessible by the disabled people. In addition to that, we had a lot of roundtables discussing the issues for the disabled people, especially for the disabled, especially for the Down syndrome and other also. And we in this roundtables we try to gather all the parties, which are we have the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs in here in Bahrain, and all the Ministry of Health and the civil society organizations also, to get them involved in that roundtables and to get more information about the main issues for the disabled people, and how to solve these issues. And all the recommendations were raised by the National Institution for Human Rights for the necessary ministries here in Bahrain, and we continue contact these ministries in order to apply these recommendations which were raised by these roundtables. In addition to that, we have a lot of we have a number of like in 2020 we received one complaint in year 2020 regarding the right to education for the disabled, and we have received also a number of complaints in 2021 in the context of also these are the complaints we received in 2021 to the right of education and the right to physical and moral safety and the right to health also for the disabled people. In addition to that, we have a very we have a training program for the legal clinic with the university, the main university, governmental university in Bahrain, which is the university in Bahrain, and we have discussed also discussed the rights of the disabled people, and we always it is we have this training twice a year with the university students, and we always try to focus on the disabled people. We especially we have make a discussion with these students about the rights of disabled and the rights of the especially the sports rights of disabled people here in Bahrain. And we have a number of recommendations that were also mentioned in our annual report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fatima from Bahrain. And when I did the capacity assessment review recently with the Commission, we were really impressed with the work that you were doing. And also we spoke with members of the disability community during that review, and they were very appreciative of the cooperative work that you were undertaking. And I think that's another critical role for NHRIs, which is around engaging with the community, the disability community themselves, nothing about them without them, which is such an important part of the process of the work that we do. Ben, I think we may have a question for you as well in relation to the Australian national NDIS work. I don't know whether that's something you'd like to respond to in chat. You may want some time to think about that, but I also have the, if I briefly go to you, Ben, and then I will go to the Justice Kumar at the National Human Rights Commission of India. But I'll just go to you first. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Well, I may share with you one experience in the Honorable Supreme Court when I was a practicing counsel, and the Person with Disability Act 1995 has not yet come. A matter was being argued before a bench of the Supreme Court, where a blind man wanted to appear in an examination, very competitive examination, and the judges asked him to write, and dictation was given by the stenographer of the court. When he started taking dictation and typing, it was at almost double the speed of ordinary stenographer. The judges were so influenced and impressed, they immediately allowed him to appear in the examination, and when the result came, he was in the first 20 people in the most competitive exam of this country, that is Indian Administrative Services. So there is no dearth of talent in the disabled people. We only have to have access to them. We only have to reach out to them. That is why on 22nd of April 2022, the Human Rights Commission made a recommendation that all these acts should be put together on a web with the help of National Information Technology Corporation, and they should be made accessible, wide publicity be given. That is why I thought I recommended to the Asian Pacific countries too to collect these apps for all types of disabled people, so that they may have easy access at one place and use the technology to the best of their use, to the best of for the best of the benefits. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Justice Kumar. Appreciate your comments. I will now revert back to Ben Gauntlet. Ben, the question was on the National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, in Australia. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Pip. The National Disability Insurance Scheme works by making, the government will make an initial assessment of what are the reasonable and necessary supports for an individual with a significant disability. What will then happen is that that individual will be assigned a budget in terms of what are their reasonable and necessary supports in the community, and they'll have to spend that budget in accordance with an agreed plan with the government, with it being accounted for later on in terms of how they've spent that funds. In terms of the outcomes and measuring the outcomes, there is actuarial data which is collected, which is available in quarterly reports under the National Disability, from the National Disability Insurance Agency. That outcomes framework and data is something that we're continuing to work on in terms of its efficacy. And Australia is looking at establishing a national disability data asset, which would be attached to our Australian disability strategy. But that's very much in the early stages of development. At present, the data which we obtain from the National Disability Insurance Agency is relatively simplistic in nature and does not, for example, take into consideration a person's housing or transport or socioeconomic circumstances in looking at the outcomes the person obtains. We measure the NDIS by its impact on such things as employment, education, people going to hospital and things of that nature. But we have to get better at how we measure the benefits of it. And one of the things that we have to also improve is, with the pandemic, there has been a shortage of people working in support work to enable people to spend money in their national disability insurance plans. So it is a very, very good system, but it probably was not designed to work in a long-term pandemic. And for that reason, it's being recalibrated a little bit to make it more effective. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, Ben. And so this will be the final call for any questions or comments before we close. I don't see any hands up at this point, although Fatima, your hand is up again. And
Yes, sorry, I just want to add something. I will share now a link. It is for also one of the things that we focused on during our awareness campaign. It was the 10 principles for my protection, well-being, and development as a girl, boy, or adolescent with disability. And it was very effective, and we have shared through our social media. So I already sent the link on the chat now. It was conducted by the United Nations.
Great, thanks, Fatima. I see the link on the chat. Thank you very much. And now I have Mohammed from the Commonwealth Harm. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Dear Pip and everyone, just want to hear from you, your experience, especially from Malaysia, Australia, and India about the participation by person with disabilities in development planning. How do you enhancing their participation in development planning? I just want to hear your experience in your respective country. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mohammed. So this is a question to our speakers, to all of you. If any of you would like to speak to the question on how you involved people with disabilities in any of the program of work that you've undertaken in terms of either law reform, advocacy, engagement with government, any of those issues, if anyone would like to respond, please do let me know. Sandra, if you'd like to let me know. The Indian Commission. Ben has his hand up. Ben, I'll go to you. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. In terms of the involvement of people with disability, the Australian Disability Strategy has a Disability Advisory Council attached to it of people with disabilities. So government will ask that Disability Advisory Council for feedback on government policies, and they'll provide feedback. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, for example, has an independent advisory council, which is constituted by a number of people with disability who will again provide their feedback on particular policies. In terms of, I think the question raised issues of local area planning, etc., we have quite detailed disability standards relating to education, transport, and premises. But it is quite common for local government, which is our third tier of government, to have a group of people with disability to act as advisors on matters of planning or policy development. And those individuals will often come from a range of disability backgrounds. So, for example, they may have sensory disability, intellectual disability, physical disability, and they'll provide feedback on how they would interact with those policies and make recommendations. We are moving to an approach where co-design is hoped for, but we're not quite there yet in terms of outcomes.
Thank you, Ben. Would any other Commission representative like to make any comment on how they've engaged with people with disabilities?
That's okay.
Okay, I think Mr. Park from Korea, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's sharing practice. Let me introduce one case of Korea. It's about web accessibility for the visually impaired. In the past, most of the web pages in Korea had no alternative text for the visually impaired. And there was a widespread perception that web accessibility for the visually impaired was hard to achieve due to the financial burden of companies or technical problems. However, recently, NHRI of Korea is seeing the lack of web accessibility as discrimination. So now many institutions and companies are improving their web and apps and understanding of web accessibility for the visually impaired is socially spreading now. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Jinam, for your comments about information technology. Now, do I have any other questions, any comments?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, please, Myanmar, please go ahead.
I am the mentoring officer, Myanmar National Human Rights Commission.
Hi, welcome.
Commission currently, according to current situation and COVID pandemic restriction, but person with disability the rights of person with disability, NGO, CSO communication, PWD organization communication, and 2022 March for the visual empower UDHR brain Myanmar language publish and distribution. Human rights activities by promotion and education activities, best practice, human rights lecturer or training school. The rights persons or disability rights, group rights lecture. According to the current situation, person with disability, the rights of person with disability or monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate that. Now, any other comments, finally, my colleagues, before we conclude the session for the day? We will have some very short concluding remarks, both from the APF and the National Human Rights Commissioner. I don't know whether my colleague Amy, our communications manager, may want us to take a group photo that we can tweet out to everybody. You let me know, Amy, if that's something that we can do, would like to do.
That would be great if people are happy to turn on their cameras and smile for the camera. I can take a couple of screenshots. Be lovely to see everyone participating.
Thanks, Amy. So Amy's willing, and thank you very much she's going to take a couple of group photos for us. And once we get that done, we can do our final remarks and then conclude for the day. So if you'd like to be in the photo, please do put on your video. And Amy, take it away.
Thanks, everyone. I'll take a picture in 3, 2, 1. Big smiles, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
wonderful.
Amy.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. We will now close the meeting, colleagues. I will hand over first to Justice Kumar to make your remarks, Justice, and then I will finalise it. And so please, over to you, Justice.
Having heard all the speakers on various subjects, I think a large number of statute, United Nations Convention, granting rights to the disabled person have been enshrined. But the challenge is how to make these rights available, how to reach out to those who need our help. We in India have large number of prosthetic institutions providing artificial limbs. We have also for visually impaired various institutions catering to their needs, but still the population of disabled in our country is 26 million, 26.8 million, as in the earlier part of the address, Mr. Rajiv Jain, member, Human Rights Commission, has highlighted. How many of them we could reach? That is a big challenge. So many apps for the blind, for mentally impaired, for visually impaired, for deaf and dumb. So many apps are in the field. But question which I ask myself, whether these are accessible to all of the people or to majority. Let us make an effort to reach out to each one of them who need us. Writing the rights in a statute book or any United Nations convention is a beginning, but it must end by achieving the goal that we reach out to each one. This would be my request, this would be my challenge, which I take it here in the National Rights Commission India. And that is why on 22nd of April 2022, we recommended that all these facilities available must be collected together on one website, and so that it may be accessible to each one who needs. We must create our ambassador who may take the message to the needy people. So these remarks, I would express my gratitude to the Asia Pacific Forum for granting us opportunity. Thank you so much.
Justice Kumar, thank you so much, and thank you for laying out the challenge for us all. And I think it's a heavier responsibility because, as you say, there are many more people with disabilities and more challenges that we're all navigating, including with COVID, as Ben has also pointed out and other speakers. And I think that's why it is so important that the role that the national human rights institutions have in working with partnership with stakeholders. It's a whole of society approach, but does present with many, many challenges. Thank you for your comments. I'd like to finally wrap up and say on behalf of the APF Secretariat, my colleagues at the Secretariat, that we really do appreciate the APF members really participating in these dialogues, and they really are your ideas, and it's a great privilege for us to be able to bring this platform to you and to hear and be updated on the work that you are doing. No doubt the national human rights institutions have played a significant role in providing the legal foundations for people with disabilities, but the challenges are still ongoing for us, and there are many more cutting edge issues. And I think that discussion around information technology is such a critical one, and something that I think we can reflect on further. I'd very much like to thank again the Indian National Human Rights Commission for its leadership, continuing leadership in highlighting people with disabilities for our discussion today. And I'd like to thank the members, Mr. Jain and Justice Kumar, for speaking. And I'd also personally like to thank Mr. Arun Turawa, the Undersecretary for Coordination, for his invaluable cooperation in bringing this discussion today. And I'd also like to thank my APF Secretariat colleagues today, especially Amy Janowski, who's our Communications Manager, and also to Kieran Fitzpatrick, who is unable to speak today, but has been very supportive of the dialogue process. So we all look forward to meeting you at our next APF dialogue, which will be on the issue of the right to employment with a focus on pay equity. And the APF will be doing that in partnership with our other APF member, the New Zealand National Human Rights Commission, and that will be on Friday, the 26th of August. I will be sending out the concept note and the invitation to that dialogue at the end of this month, but please keep it on your radar. Amy does a great job with tweeting. We have a specific Twitter handle for the dialogue series, which is noted in the concept note as well. And we, as you know, are recording these sessions, and they will be available to you and to the public on our YouTube channel. So thank you all very much. Really appreciate your time and the content and the substance of the discussions today. Again, on behalf of the APF, thank you, and have a very good morning, a very good afternoon, and a very good evening. Thank you.